Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Thank you all for joining me today. And we're going to have a very special event on intelligence, meaning 007 type spycraft, tradecraft, fieldcraft, and all the aspects of spying and intelligence, state and military. We have my old friend and top moderator, Knight of the Round Table, Mr. Surprise from Naval Intelligence, here with us today. The right man for the job to get into this. We've covered intelligence before. This will probably be part of a series with Surprise and a series on intelligence as well. We also talk history and military with him, but today we're going to talk intelligence. So before we get started, we are the Roundtable Discord server. Just Google the Roundtable Discord. You must join the server. It's where all the magic happens. You can also find us on the roundtablediscord.com. You can go to Discord, the public access Discord thing, and find us through conspiracy theories or politics. We're also on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Twitch, you name it. So join us on the Roundtable Discord. Now, welcome, Surprise, my friend. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
Good, no problem. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. So we're going to talk intelligence. We'll take a different approach with this little reboot. What would be your most succinct definition of intelligence for the audience, for anyone who may not be familiar at all?
The gathering of information of a sensitive nature, either overtly or covertly, to be analyzed and acted upon by military and political leaders, would be the quickest way to say it.
Perfect. Very well said. Again, just recovering this ground, tell us about the two major types of intelligence briefly.
So you have SIGINT, which is signals intelligence, and that's the interception of electronic signals. So, like I said, like the NSA does this. So whether that's radio signals or your search history, just anything like that, any signal. And then HUMINT is going to be human intelligence, and that's sort of getting up close and personal, penetrating networks, handling assets. By assets, I mean people. The more traditional type of intelligence that people usually think of when they think of spying.
So basically, signals intelligence would be intercepting internet, radio, television, probably mostly internet these days. Human intelligence could be, anything from a female honeypot intended to seduce someone and get pillow talk out of them, to, an agent, double agent, working for one government but reporting to another secretly. These kind of things.
Well, those two examples that you mentioned would probably be more in the human intelligence, whereas signals intelligence would be like Bletchley Park, for instance, like trying to break a code, trying to see what people are saying, like tapping an undersea cable, that kind of thing, tapping a phone, all that electronic stuff. So pretty impersonal, but. It's the game of analysts, really, not operators and case officers necessarily.
Right, exactly. So yeah, sorry, I may have cut out, but I was just saying signals intelligence would be internet monitoring, etc. Human intelligence is the face-to-face. Okay, got it.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so I'm assuming that in the modern world with the rise of metadata, everybody having cell phones and social media, that there's been a major swing in the intelligence worlds from human intelligence, probably during the Cold War period. This was huge, human intelligence. I would assume now it's a lot less important because the signals intelligence domain is so massive now with the social media and the internet. There's probably a lot less situations where you actually need to insert a human in the flesh because there's so much information you could get through hacking or tapping someone's phone. Is that correct, do you think?
That would be true, although I think the shift happened mostly in the Cold War, where basically the CIA, to be more exact, I don't know if it was Richard Bissell or who said it, but basically it wasn't just one guy. Like they figured it out collectively that human intelligence aspect against sophisticated totalitarian societies, it's very hard get a man in Moscow and then him to be like, he'll build a network and like have someone inside on the Politburo. So you saw a real shift towards, overflights. So like the U-2 spy plane, and just SIGINT more generally because that's what works better. So that's been and of course it goes back further than that. I mean, Room 40 that the British had in World War One, Bletchley Park most famously in World War Two. The Magic, I think wasn't it Magic where we broke the Japanese codes. So as long as there's been signals, as it were, you've had signals intelligence. But I think the Cold War was the catalyst of, all these old OSS guys who were used to, swashbuckling, spy work, and paramilitary operations. They realized, oh shit, that doesn't really fly with the Soviets. Guess what? They have their own counterintelligence and intelligence. They're pretty damn good, namely the KGB. So they had to find other ways, or they had to lean on other ways to get information. And that information was pretty accurate, pretty prodigious. That's pretty much where we got most of our information on the Soviet Union, these other less personal ways. But then with the advent of the internet and, the shitstorm after 9/11, yeah, it's definitely blown up again in the last 2 decades.
Sorry, just had to open my mic. So just a quick historical point, since you mentioned them, just briefly, can you tell us what Bletchley Park was? Because people probably haven't heard of that. Just generally, what was Bletchley Park?
It was the British operation. I think there were some people from like Poland in it too. I don't know. I'd have to look, but it was primarily a British thing to break the German Enigma codes. The Germans had an Enigma, a machine that was called the Enigma. It encrypted messages. It was insanely complex, very very difficult to break. That's putting it very simply, but and that whole operation was cracking and then reading those codes so that basically we could figure out what the Nazis were up to. And it's called Bletchley Park because the operation was out of a mansion called Bletchley Park, or an estate. I guess the whole property was called this, but it was out of a mansion called Bletchley Park.
I see. And just briefly, is that Alan Turing that was working in Bletchley Park? Okay. Yes. So this is what you call cryptography, both making and breaking codes, which would be a major part of intelligence then. So Alan Turing is the famous mathematician who helped crack the Enigma code and was later chemically castrated for homosexuality and I think committed suicide, if I'm not mistaken.
I do know that he was gay. I didn't know about the forced sterilization or the suicide. It sounds right.
Yeah, it's considered one of the tragic. Sort of tragic ironies, because in a way they say he sort of won World War II in the sense that if he hadn't cracked the Enigma code, we may not have won the war. But then he was so badly treated by his government afterwards. But a separate historical point there.
He accelerated it, and he saved about million. He saved. They calculated it out to be like 6 million lives or something like that. But he basically he ended the war early.
I mean, shout out to the Poles, of course, because they did some very good work in the 1930s where they could read what the Germans were saying within about 2 hours after receiving the message. So Poland got really good at it, but of course they added a fourth rotor to the Enigma machine in 1939, so they weren't back to the drawing board per se, but Poland, I think it was actually a Polish guy that smuggled one of the Enigma machines into England after Poland got invaded. So Poland did a lot of, which you never really hear about, and it is kind of surprising, given Poland's not seen as like, it's not Britain, but they managed to do it in the 30s with some competence. But yeah, I mean, Bletchley Park has some pretty well-deserved fame.
Right. So, in terms of your personal interest and connection to this, I understand that it's okay to mention because I think you have in the past. Is that correct? You're able to talk a little bit about your own career?
I mean, mine is not really anything like. Uh, I wouldn't. I don't
Well,
know.
I'm
It's
just
more
saying
of
if
an
it's okay for
analyst
you,
type thing.
yeah. If it's okay for you to talk about, I was just going to say you mentioned before you work in naval target analysis, essentially.
Yeah, strike planning. But that's it's a little bit. It's not exactly on Langley's level. I'll put it that way.
No, I'm not suggesting that it is. I'm just saying that's to give the audience a grounding of your personal background. Not that that necessarily matters for expertise, but you're working in strike planning in the Navy, if that's correct. So essentially, target analysis of a sort.
Basically, that's a yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of the modern spy game, is there any areas that you think are kind of heating up right now in particular? And I guess a side question to that, how do you think the intelligence game plays into the whole coronavirus thing? Do you think that the coronavirus thing is an intelligence operation, or that there is some major intelligence operations going on right now related to it? Like, can you draw a connection here between intelligence and COVID?
I would be surprised if there were. Nothing that I can discern. It literally just looks like the Chinese propensity for wet markets caused the shitstorm that went out of control. I've heard through some people who are more in the know than I am, some family members who are fairly high up in a different branch, not the Navy, about it being escaping from a lab, not in a weapons capacity. They were very clear to stress that it was just something they were, but who knows what it was going to be. And that's what did it. But most people, myself included, think it's an undercooked bat that kind of spiraled out of control.
Right. I was
Because there's
thinking
no
not so.
logic to the current situation. Everyone's losing money, and that's all anyone cares about. And you can tell the elites kind of got caught on their back foot with this one. Some of them even caught it. So I don't see I don't see a design.
Right. So that's a little bit of a separate question in terms of, was coronavirus an engineered bioweapon, et cetera? And we've talked about that quite a lot in other podcasts. But I think what I was getting at more is there now a big intelligence operation, perhaps by the states, United States or others, to figure out the origin of this? Because in Fox News, et cetera, they've started to run with the mainstream narrative that there was this Wuhan weapons lab and it may have actually escaped. Now, it may not on purpose, but I'm just imagining there's a big intelligence game involved. Russia information there.
Robot.
Yeah, you roboted a bit. But I get the thrust of your question. If there is, that would be something that would be well above my pay grade. Because I can't say if that suspicion even exists in Washington, and if it does, then what they're trying to do about it. I mean, there's a pretty brisk intelligence battle, shall we say? And I'm especially conscious of it down here in Florida. I think the state of Florida, in an unprecedented move, has even passed law, unprecedented for like individual states, has even passed laws and issued guidelines with respect to Chinese spying. And I'm sure we're doing the same thing over there. So that might get folded into that, but I couldn't say either way on a COVID-19 angle.
Well, that reminds me of another even more current event that you might be able to give me some insight into. I've been hearing rumors that there has been a tragic loss of the dear leader of North Korea. Is there any meat on that bone? Have you heard anything? Do you have any take on this? Is he indeed passed on to the heavenly realm?
I don't think so, but again, you can't really tell. I mean, obviously he's in a bad way. There's some health concerns. Trump actually wished him well. It's the last thing I read about an hour ago. So something's up, but I don't think he's. I'd be surprised if he was dead. I think some doctors are going to be executed here in the next couple weeks, but I'd be surprised if they killed him, accident or otherwise.
Just hypothetically, if he had passed away, I mean, it seems like a long shot, but I mean, imagine he died from COVID. I doubt he did. But say he died, period, from a heart attack. Do you have any take on what that would do geopolitically or domestically for North Korea or in terms of international politics? Like, what do you think would be the effect of a sudden death of a world leader, but specifically the North Korean dear leader?
That would be interesting. I mean, that would just throw everything into flux. I mean, because he's not, what is he, 35 or something? I mean, he's not supposed to go. I mean, he's supposed to have a few decades on him, so that would be I'm not privy to our contingency plans, of course. I don't think we, move in or anything like that because you have China to consider. They don't want U.S. troops right across the Yalu River. But, yeah, I'm not sure. What that would be kind of a wild card. Now, of course, no one knows the North Korean what they think about it, but I suspect they've made no plans. I mean, he set himself up to.
So who's next in line if he's really dead?
That's the thing. I don't know. He's killed off some of his uncles. I think he killed one with an anti-aircraft gun.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's not funny, but it's kind of funny.
You laughed. I did.
It's like I mean, it's like it's not like China where it's like. I mean, Xi's really centralized power to himself as well, so that statement's less true than it was in say like 2012. But I mean, I don't know if you're in an absolute monarchy. What do you do when the king dies at 30 something and there's no heir?
I remember.
I couldn't tell.
Please don't anybody interject. We're still doing an interview format. I'll let you know when it's open discussion. So for now, me and Surprise are going to continue, and then I'll let you know when it's opened up. So, in other questions, I guess, what do you think is in the horizon in terms of international conflict? So there was the whole Iran-America conflict at the beginning of the year, and people were worried about World War III. That kind of died down. Now there's coronavirus, but I have heard some people say there might be either coronavirus is somehow part of or leading to or covering for a potential ramp up of international conflict. Even the World War III concept is being floated again. And actually, I don't know if you're familiar with like Cheyenne Mountain and these deep underground military bases that are associated with continuity of government. But apparently some of these have been activated, and this could be to do with COVID, or it could be to do with something else. So what do you think? Are we escalating here? And if so, towards what?
I don't see any immediate escalation. I think everyone's pretty much worried about keeping their own house in order. We had a system. We'll see if we still have it, and this virus and our reaction to it pretty much shut it down. But whenever that happens, I mean, that does lead to conflict. In broad terms, if you want to look at like a 20, 30-year outlook, I mean, there's definitely it's 1890 again. I mean, you have multiple great powers. You've got Russia, you've got China, you've got the United States, then you've got weaker but regionally powerful countries like Turkey, like Iran. Who knows how Europe's going to shake out? What the fate of the EU will be. So like in broad terms, I would say it's multipolar. You're going back to, it's not just one country on top, but and then like a couple minor ones nipping at their heels. But as far as the immediate aftermath of this, I honestly couldn't say. I don't think it'll be good, but you'll have to ask me in like December. We'll have a clearer picture of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a bit, speculative, but one thing I thought was interesting is that COVID, apparently the Chinese have been successful at protecting their navy from coronavirus or COVID. And as a result, they have their aircraft carrier groups operating in the Pacific Ocean now on some kind of new mission, the aircraft group. But the United States, I may have got the ocean wrong, but the point is that I probably got the ocean wrong, but the point is the Chinese have their aircraft carrier group is active and on a mission. But I think they have more than one, but one of them is anyway. And meanwhile, America has had COVID kind of ravage its aircraft carriers. There was actually an aircraft carrier captain who was laid off or fired because he had publicly issued a letter basically castigating the government for allowing COVID to ravage this aircraft carrier. I guess there was like thousands of cases on this one ship. And because of that aircraft carrier group is now non-operational. Now that might not seem like that big a deal, but when you consider how powerful and expensive aircraft carrier groups are and how difficult it is to deal with them by any conventional means, the simple fact that, an entire aircraft carrier group has been incapacitated by COVID in America and then the Chinese is operative, that makes a significant difference in terms of balance of power. So am I totally paranoid here in thinking that there could be a connection and that COVID could be a bioweapon and this could be an attempt to deal with the otherwise difficult to counter strength of aircraft carriers? Because COVID is, it spreads in confined spaces, it's contagious, so it's kind of well designed. And when you look at all the cruise ships and shit that got fucked by it, am I wrong in thinking this could be like an anti-aircraft carrier weapon, or is that too much of a stretch?
I would say that's probably a bit of a stretch. I mean, we have 10 of them that are like worthy of the name, and then like 22 total if you count like amphibious assault. So I mean, taking out one, I'm not even sure where that one was. Shame on me. I should know that, but I don't remember. So it's a poor job if so. You'd have to do like at least for like the whole 7th Fleet, if not the whole Navy.
Yeah, I thought so as well, but just an interesting side note to COVID. Trying to think, how about space, right? So another big dimension is space. There's Trump made the Space Force. Now they're talking about mining the moon and asteroids. Russia doesn't like this. Also, apparently, Russia dispatched some kind of military satellite. There's been some kind of Russian satellites pursuing American satellites and doing kind of maneuvers, and satellites dropping out other satellites. So there seems to be some kind of heating up of space war. Can you say anything about that? Where you think that's going and how intelligence ties into that, if it does?
And there's a lot there. Where to begin? I mean, it's well, like on the satellite question, like no doubt. I mean, those have been essential since like what, the 60s. And as far as like think here. Give me a sec.
I mean, it's okay. If not, I just thought I'd ask. I don't know if there's a connection between naval operations.
Something just.
He was receiving input from the big giant head.
Yeah. But no, I mean it's definitely a factor. I mean, you look at every country with any program worth speaking of, the development of anti-satellite missiles where you can literally blow one out of the sky. The mining thing, I'm not entirely sure about. Like, I don't know why you would mine the moon or asteroids. That doesn't have a lot of practical. I don't see the angle on that, but not privy to all that. Good night. But yeah, I mean, and I'm trying to be careful on like what I say here, because satellites are a big part of my job. But essentially, I mean, the short answer is yes, it's going to be important. How is it going to be important? It's going to be both for communications, for spying. I mean, everything relies on that. Maybe not so much for your internet or your phone. A lot of that's ground-based. Like, people don't realize how much, what are they called? Those fiber cables?
Fiber optics.
On them for like, but like GPS, China's new system. It's not called GPS. I forget the acronym. I'm sure Russia has something similar. All that's in space, and it's, the more the capabilities grow, the more ability you're going to have to interfere with another country's capacity in that domain. I'll not dox myself, but
You're cutting in and out.
Maybe if I could do an assist on this, since he's in the civilian sphere, maybe if Rat Minaj wanted to talk about, or Mr. Richard Dawson wanted to talk about that for like a minute or two on the satellite aspect of it.
What's the question?
Essentially, I just asked about,
and its connection with intelligence, or not space and intelligence, basically.
Yeah, or just more broadly, the significance of the emerging field of space as a domain of conflict and where this is kind of going.
I mean, in terms of communication, space is much less useful than we think.
Yes.
99% of all of the telecommunications travel in the U.S. or even worldwide is handled by underground cables. Space operates 1% of it. Where space does play a significant role is with military GPS. The advent of space as a contested domain is much more applicable to the military sphere. And so, if an adversary were to take out GPS satellites, that would force the military to innovate quite quickly. So that's why a lot of the Navy is going back and is teaching us how to navigate using the stars, because if GPS goes away, you have to know how to get around.
Right. Thank you.
I can confirm that. On that last bit.
Follow-up question, or not a follow-up question, but a different question would be, just generally, right? When you associate intelligence and spying, people usually think of the CIA. So first of all, is it true that the CIA is the biggest player in intelligence for the United States, or is there other agency that's more significant? And secondarily, what would you say is the state of the CIA right now? Are there changes in how the CIA is operating? Is there new developments? Just what can you tell us about the CIA as regards intelligence in the modern world?
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
Well, I mean, the CIA, there's a reason it's called Central.
Sorry, yeah, that was a question for surprise, actually, unless it...
if he wants to take this, though, that's fine, because I know he has some ties with the CIA.
Okay. Did you want to give us something?
No,
Dawson?
I'll just add, there's a reason... I mean, the answer is yes, and there's a reason why it's called Central. And so all foreign intelligence has to go through the CIA, and then it's... especially when it comes to creating analysis projects. So, I mean, on the military side, you do have the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, which handles more of a defense product. If you ever get around to reading the congressionally mandated China military power report, which is an every year publication. A lot of that intelligence comes through the DIA. But then, I mean, you've got the State Department, they've got an intel agency. Every military branch has an intelligence agency. You've got the National Geographic Intelligence Agency. They do a lot. But I mean, the CIA is the largest writ far.
Oh yeah, I mean we have about 16. It's called the intelligence community. We have about six. It might be it's 15 or 16. It's somewhere in there. Agencies. He mentioned the DIA. He mentioned
17.
NGRO. There's the NRO. There's the NSA, probably the second most famous. There's the ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence. That's our oldest one, founded in the 1880s. But the CIA is, first off, the CIA is the only independent one. So all those are going to be a branch of either a military branch or just the Department of Defense more generally. I think the Treasury Department has an intelligence agency, the Office of Financial Intelligence. I think they call it of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence. But so yeah, there's a whole bunch of different people working on it, but the CIA is that's par excellence. They're the only independent one. The director of the CIA used to be the director pretty much of all intelligence, but now we have something called the DNI. But it's the biggest. As far as its state, it's always going to be hard to tell. I'm aware of some, despite what I said earlier, I'm aware of some conflict within the agency regarding secrecy, for one. I can post an excellent article on that, that deals more with the general intelligence community, but that's obviously going to disproportionately affect the CIA. And then also, and this is perennial, so this isn't really like a whole, this isn't unique to our time.
I think you might be cutting in and out again a bit. Sir, if you could just jump in and out, unless it's on my end.
No, he's good on my end so far.
Okay, I apologize. Never mind.
No, you're good. You're good. But just the relationship between human and SIGINT, and how much you rely on one or the other. And of course, the CIA has taken a lead role in counterterrorism through the SAC, particularly the SOG department of the SAC, which is the Special Activities Center.
I know those guys.
They have the political operations group and the special operations group. The SOG is the paramilitary wing of the CIA, essentially. I mean, those are the people who kill people. And that's, you have, with the return of great power competition, just like the military, there's kind of people are thinking about how do we shift from killing tribesmen in the hills or doing a raid on a village in Mali versus, learning, not that they ever forgot necessarily, but, focusing more on like countering the MSS, for instance.
Yeah, I can confirm that there's a large debate internal to CIA about whether or not they should continue down the road of playing an active military role versus should they get back to their bread and butter of analyzing intelligence.
Yes, exactly.
So I wanted to bring up
very paramilitary in the last couple decades, and Rap said it all. There's a debate on whether or not that emphasis should be maintained.
I wanted to bring up Operation Sea Spray and the DICE trials, and how that kind of if this thing is a bioweapon, how that kind of correlates to modern day times. So basically it was a U.S. Navy secret experiment in the 1950s where they sprayed bacteria over the San Francisco Bay Area. And then the DICE trials was where they took a bacterium combined with phenol and an anthrax simulant and sprayed it across a town called Dorset by the U.S. and UK military and this was in like England, like West England, I believe. Southwest England.
Yeah, the
that
CIA
happened
has definitely
in
been
Dorset.
into that.
Yeah, that happened in Dorset in England. Joint military operation between two different organizations. They say it was some sort of what would you call it? Operation to test. I think it was. They said it was to do with response times, etc., etc. But I don't know if that is what it was really to do with.
I posted a link in general chat so you guys can check it out if you want.
Thank you. And just to make it clear, thank you, everybody. Just going to open it up for the audience now. If anyone has any questions for Surprise or anything I want to say about intelligence, go ahead. Otherwise, I have one more I can ask. Let's open it up.
Hey, is my side working good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, Surprise, I'd like to say at first, thank you for serving and your family members. Hope y'all stay safe during these times. And I've heard back in 2009, I remember whenever I was younger, that Kim Jong-il was fun to pick up over Kim Jong-un. Is there anything that y'all had over that, or are they a democracy now? I can't remember if that happened.
Wait, say that again?
Kim Jong-il is supposed to take his place back in 2009 over Kim Jong-un. But I've heard something about them becoming a democracy. I was just wondering if you know anything about that.
No,
Because
North Korea is not a democracy.
Yeah, North Korea is not a democracy. As far as assassinations go, that's a very tricky business, and that's not going to happen as much as like a lot of people think. Intelligence agencies worldwide are really not. It's kind of like it's kind of like kicking over an anthill. I mean, you can do that with like some country and like you can do that to like Honduras or like Burkina Faso, but I don't think the United States has any or has ever had, at least not since the 50s during the Korean War, maybe any plans of knocking off the leaders of any dangerous opponents like North Korea. Not that North Korea is like an economic powerhouse, but they're not the type of people. First off, good luck getting in. I mean, that's kind of like the Soviet Union problem, where humans is not going to do you a ton of good when you have a pervasive security state and a closed society. So it's like, how are you getting your guys in there to begin with? And then once you do it, like, then what? Because there's just a geopolitical headache when it comes to that. How's China going to react? You always have to think about that. What's next? And when it comes to assassinations, unless it's like a client state, kind of like we did to I forgot his name, in Vietnam in 1961, or it's just a country that can't really do anything to hurt you. You have to be very careful about assassinations. The CIA knows this just as well, even better than I do, and they act accordingly.
okay, now that being said, one more question, then I'll give over to Mike about COVID-19. You said that we came out of now. That being said, China has a bad respiratory issue with their vents facilities of everything going on there. They have a whole bunch of factories, smog, all that. Do you believe that they were trying to make something that would strengthen the immune system inside their respiratory systems and their lungs and stuff, so that they would lower the cancer rate inside their country and be able to keep people healthy? Or do you believe that they might have been making a no vaccine or something to keep people from getting a strand of maybe pneumonia or something like that?
My sense is that COVID actually, like the official story is correct, and it actually came out of a wet market in Wuhan. Like a bat shat on a pangolin. That pangolin was not cooked enough, or a bat itself was not cooked enough. Here we are. But if it wasn't a lab, my sense is that it was for research purposes. This is not Ebola. I mean, I don't. It's hard to see how you would weaponize this. I don't think. And again, I'm like 90% wet market, 10%. Maybe the government over there did something. But if that 10% is correct, like you alluded to, I think it was more for like benign research purposes. Because if you want a super weapon, you've got to think that China already has biological weapons, just like all the like top 5 powers in the world. COVID-19 is not what you would pick. So if it did come out of a lab, I don't know if it's to like strengthen their immune systems or whatever, but I think it was for benign purposes. But no, this is just this is a foodborne illness gone terribly wrong.
Okay.
I've got a question. What do you see as the biggest strengths, or what do you see as the biggest threats and opportunities for the U.S. in the short term, 1 to 5 years, the medium term, 5 to 10 years, and the long term, 10 years and down the road?
And COVID kind of turns this up on its head because of what it's done to the world economy and the way it's like, yeah, it slowed us down, but we kind of got to freeze not we didn't do it, but we kind of got to freeze the game while we were leading. But I would say, this could get politically sensitive. The biggest threat in the near term would probably be containing relations with Iran, making sure that doesn't spiral out of control into a horrible misunderstanding like it did in January, and it's looking like it's threatening to now. 1 to 5 years, threat and opportunity, extricating ourselves from the Middle East and actually executing a pivot to Asia, which is, in my opinion, vitally needed. But I don't, it's a coin toss, in my opinion, on how successfully we'll be able to do that. Whether or not we'll be hypnotized by counterinsurgency more broadly and the Middle East in particular, and not get with it as far as the great power competition that's coming. That remains to be seen, because the military and the intelligence community is talking about this, but ultimately it's up to political leaders, and that's just too hard to tell. It's hard to say on that. Where we'll be in this November, let alone 2024. God forbid there's another terrorist attack that like refascinates us. There's no way to tell. So I would say that'd be the biggest task, and that in that task lies the greatest midterm threat. And long term, it's got to be China. Despite what I just said when I began this, China is contained. That's the ball game. I mean, we get another American century. India's not taking our place. No offense. Russia's not. They've got a lot of nukes and a competent military, more or less. But they're, it's if China is stopped, if China is stymied, that's it. I mean, it's America from here on out. I mean, you look at the problems with Europe, Germany. It's us and Beijing. But if we get it wrong, the biggest threat is now we're in a situation where you have a Chinese behemoth. They might start picking off our allies, kind of like what they've done in the Philippines, but in the longer term and for more people. Once people decide, oh, well, the United States can't protect us, so we might as well suffer it and do a deal. And that's, I don't think that's an existential threat to the United States, but that puts us behind. That leaves a lot of work for future generations if we let China get that jump. So despite the economic slowdown, despite the problems with the Chinese economy and how over-leveraged it is, I think long-term, the threats, kind of like the Middle East, it's the opportunity and threat, two sides of the same coin, and how we handle Beijing. And that's 10 years, and that's 30 years, and that's 40 years. Really till mid-century. That's 30 years now. Damn, it's 2020. Yeah, that's my that would be. I'm already rambling, but lest I ramble too much, that'd be my like brief summation.
So another question, I guess. What do you see in terms of superpower politics right now? I mean, I always ask about this: Russia, China, America. What's the state of play politically? Relative power rising or falling in relation to any of these parties? Conflict getting more intense, more friendship? What do you think?
I've been less and less complacent on Russia's dogshit demography. I'm not sure, provided they play their cards right, how much the whole "there will be no Russians in 2050" really plays out. I think that might be something that I know it's something that people have assumed up to now, and I don't know how. I don't know the extent to which Moscow will fade away the way people think it does. Not just because it has 10,000 nukes or whatever, but just I don't know about that. Now, China and Russia are kind of strange bedfellows. I mean, even when they were both communists, they split in the mid '60s, early mid '60s. Russia knows that in any Chinese Russian alliance, it's the junior partner. There's some, I mean, there's cultural, racial issues on the Russian end, but there's also uneasiness about Chinese expansion and what that could mean for Siberia, Eastern Russia in general, the resources there. So, I mean, if I was putting my Kissinger hat on, and you can't do this in a week, you can't do this in 2 years. There's been a lot of damage done, but long term, I think, and I think that because the logic of it is so inexorable, I think it happens anyway. There's like a Nixon goes to China moment, but in reverse, where the United States and Russia come to some sort of agreement. And a lot of this is contingent on how big of a threat China becomes. But if China grows too much more, I think Moscow, and just by sheer realpolitik, Moscow and Washington come to an agreement, and to counterbalance, which I think should happen like yesterday, but it is what it is. I'm 25. I have no power, so we'll see what happens when my generation takes charge. But like long term, that's the state of play. And I crib a lot off of Professor John J. Mearsheimer on this, but intuitively it makes sense that that's where it's going. But right now, Western stances and America's stance in general kind of force Moscow and Beijing together in a partnership that I'm not sure Moscow is entirely pleased with. It's more out of necessity than it.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. Now, you said your generation, right? Now, whenever that all starts to take charge and everything, do you believe that that's going to make a change in the way how we run our country, in the ecosystem wise? Because as we could tell from by our ecosystem, our atmosphere, everything like that, this COVID-19 business and the world shutdown of everything going on has actually made our nature and our ecosystem and our atmosphere very much more healthy because we stopped doing our humanly activities, I guess, to keep our concrete jungles afloat, right? Now, what do you believe that that can bring for us to be able to keep that healthy, but keep us to be able to run our lives in a sense, right? Because it's very noticeable and it's something that is factually backed up that nature is thriving because of this.
There's a distinction
No,
to be made there, Sir Price, if you'd mind. There's a
yeah, go ahead,
distinction
go
to be
ahead.
made in the sense that just because everybody is on lockdown and therefore factories have apparently shut down, which I'll let you know they have not shut down. Every factory all across the world essentially is still working at a very similar rate to that which they were before. Then we have to add in the idea of like weather manipulation also into this, which is a full-on military operation, which can be provable with a very small amount of research or citation. So we have to add in the factors that is this something that they wish to use as evidence in the future that, oh, when we were on lockdown, so and so happened to the ozone layer, and everything biological material and everything was thriving due to the lesser of human activity. So this itself could be some sort of like co-opt to like not co-op, sorry, like a psyop of gathered information in order to make us think that it was effectually us. So it's just adding to the narrative again that we as human beings are essentially affecting the whole planet in such a vast way, and that it was never able to ever be seen before in terms of going backwards because we were never stopping going forwards. But this event has stopped us and stood us still, so therefore now we have the evidence of what would happen if everyone stopped. Again, like I said, most factories are still open. Most things are carrying on the same way. Recycling, buildings are still being built. Brick factories. My friend works in the biggest brick factory in the whole of Europe. It is still churning out bricks, maybe bricks even more at this rate. They're churning bricks out at a rate higher than before. So there's a lot that goes into that. But yeah, sorry, Surprise. Carry on. He might have to re-ask the question.
No, I think it's hard to say. I mean, it really is hard to say what the long-term effects will be. I don't think that COVID is being used or was initiated by like any Malthusian movement to show that like, okay, well, fewer mouths because look what happened. But will it be co-opted by that? Will you have sort of like an eco-fascist
That's my point, yeah.
movement that comes out of it? Or, more to 99 Problems point, will it cause greater consciousness? Like, it's hard to say because the environmental impact of the shutdown is undeniable. The world is not really on lockdown, like you alluded to, correct, Phil? And I mean, there's still, this stuff is still going on, if I could put it inelegant like that. One of the, I think the economic effects are going to way overshadow the environmental ones. But yeah, it's just it's hard for me to say how that plays out. What we're going to say in 2030 when we look back, which is an unsatisfactory answer, but alas.
No, that's fine. That's just that's more of a open kind of answer because we won't really know until that happens. Now, domestic terrorism and whatnot, from eco-terrorists, whatnot. Do you believe that might become a pickup from this, because of what happened?
Well, if they use it as evidence, maybe if they use this so-called slowing down of society in the world, being slowed down almost to a halt, and they believe that everything was slowed down, and then they see evidence to show that our ecology is essentially abundant and is is in full flourishment because we, the humans, stopped, and then all of a sudden, let's say all of this stops and we go back to normal. And then we see the CO2 levels rising, we see the ozone layer affected, you could end up with a huge group of people off the back of that saying, well, look at the evidence from when we were on lockdown. And that evidence could propel groups like those in order to become even more, I'd say, radicalistic in nature.
Okay. Yeah, it's just like we're gonna have a lot of things that's going to change because of this, and it's always good to think about the I guess the extremities that could happen from it. So thank you for answering.
So before we get too much into coronavirus or anything like that, is there anything else we want to say about intelligence? Actually, I had a question about intelligence. We may have covered this before, but what do you think is the state of domestic surveillance and spying right now? In other words, to what extent is the average American being monitored by their own government, by other governments? directly and indirectly? And how do you think that's going on these days? Do we each have an FBI agent watching us through our computer like the memes, or is it all just a pile of data that nobody's looking at, or what do you think?
I mean, it's a pile of data that nobody's looking at until they want to. So no, you don't have an NSA guy just. And that was the scandal of Edward Snowden's revelations. It's like, who did these guys look up on? It was like, oh, they would look up exes and then spy on them, watch them. So it's like they're not going to be like, I wonder what Shogun's doing today. Like that's a misnomer. And there's some debate, and I definitely take a position on it as to whether or not just massive collection and, sifting through and trying to find the needle in the haystack, but then hoovering up the biggest fucking possible haystack is really the best way to go about it.
Like using keywords?
Liar, I have handlers in multiple agencies, bro.
Yeah, but come on, Travis. I'm gonna say they're not all for the average citizen. It's more of a thing. You have to be more worried about what Amazon is collecting, what Google is collecting, what YouTube is collecting. Well, Google is.
Please
YouTube,
don't interrupt Crackstone. It's just it's rails.
What private actors collect for marketing purposes, because the more they know about you, the more effectively they can sell to you. Facebook, that's another one. That's the rationale. Like, it didn't start as them trying to be creeps. Like, I get it, but it still fucking sucks. That's going to have way more of an effect on you than a guy sitting in a building in Nevada with looking in on you, to use one of our favorites who's here with us tonight. The NSA is probably, to use your username, the NSA is probably not watching you jack off.
Yeah, the government doesn't care if you jack off.
You have no idea.
Exactly.
Okay,
so again, but just to wrap up, private actors are spying on you a lot more, or spying's not even the right word. Monitoring.
Let me get my one joke. They have more pictures of my cock than Osama bin Laden.
Wait, do you mean they have more pictures of your cock than they have pictures of Osama bin Laden, or do you mean they have more pictures of your cock than Osama bin Laden does?
There's more images of my penis at the Utah data center than they have of Osama bin Laden.
How?
Osama bin Laden had pictures of
Deactivated lasers with my dick.
NSA, your dick's not that important.
It's practically famous.
I mean, I don't want to downplay it. There are civil liberties issues that need to be hashed out, but we're not in the panopticon yet. People will mistake capability. But then again, you could have always been found. I mean, you were never, less so in the past, of course. It was harder. But, I mean, you look at what J. Edgar Hoover was doing with the FBI. I mean, that's a security state right there. I think FDR in the 40s lamented that he told this, I think he told this to Hoover, to his face, and Hoover was pissed. To his face or in a memo. He worried that he had created an American Gestapo. I mean, you look at the Red Scares, all that. Now, obviously, the capabilities today are a lot greater, but if you say fuck the government or you join your local DSA, unlike back then, you're not going to get a phone call from an FBI agent telling you to kill yourself, or a recording allegedly of you cheating on your wife, both of which actually happened to Martin Luther King, and that's just one guy. So, again, I don't want to downplay it. I don't want to say it's all fine. I mean, there's a debate to be had there, but you're not being watched at all times, not by the government. Now, your Amazon Ring camera might be a different story, but the intelligence agencies, no, they have other things to do.
So here's a question then. What do you think is the big priority of intelligence agencies right now? I mean, after 9/11, it was all apparently focused on Middle Eastern terrorism.
Well, and Rapp and I alluded to this, but for a long time, it was counterterrorism. I mean, it was counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, breaking up networks, killing individuals. But it's shifting towards great power competition. So And what that's going to look like, we'll have to see because we're in the early stages of it. But yeah, for the longest time under Bush, continuing under Obama, it's the main priority has been finding radical Islamist networks and neutralizing as best as you can, to the best of their ability. I think Jade had a question where if she was asking if you went into, because she can't talk right now, if you went into intelligence work, what would be the best direction? I want to punt this to Mr. Richard Dawson, if you have any thoughts on that. There's an agency whose culture you think might be best for a young woman going in, or if it's just kind of all, which is my hunch, that it's all personal.
I mean, it's all personal, but it's like
If he's
if
even
you're
there.
interested in military topics, you
Oh,
want to go
yeah, I definitely
CIA.
myself, my bad.
If you wanted to go, if space interests you, you'd want to look at the National Geographic intelligence agencies or the NRO. If you're interested in being a journalist, CIA. If you're interested in Treasury money, you go to Treasury. I mean, and also you can also just join one of the military branches, and they have their own military intelligence. And it's pretty easy to get into because all you have to do is join the reserves and go down to your recruiting office and say, I want to join up.
Yeah, man, I had a soft spot for the O&I, but I'm biased. CIA is pretty cool, though. I've looked into joining them in the next several years.
But it's like, I don't know how old you are, if you're a college age or what, but I mean, the best
She's
is
16.
Oh, you got plenty of time. What you might want to do is consider going to university at one of the military academies, either the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Army in West Point, or Air Force in Colorado Springs. And if you seriously want to go into intelligence, I would pick either of the three schools.
Or get abducted by aliens and force recruited like me.
What? Yeah, that is option number 4, Jade.
That's option number 4. But if you want to stay in reality, I choose between the first 3.
And I'm not an intelligence person, but it ultimately depends on what you like to do. So if you're a linguistics person, you could study certain languages and have a path into intelligence. If you like numbers, you could do analytics of some kind. If you're a people person, so if you see what I'm saying, yes, you can look at what agency, but you can also look at what is your skill set and how could you apply that to intelligence if that's the area you want to go. Because essentially anything is on the table in terms of what kind of work you could do. But
yeah, like for me, black propaganda, I sound like such a ghoul now, but like that would be something that I feel like I would be great at, but that's just me. So that's probably going to take me into the CIA, but O&I is an option. I've not really researched that enough to say. Rap's advice is probably best, and then Shogun's is also, what do you want to do? What agency? And then when you pick it, definitely the military route helps, whether your reserves are active.
Another question for Rap Manoj and Dawson, rather, and also Surprise, of course. There's been talk with COVID and coronavirus of a massive ramping up of surveillance states from Russia to America to China. COVID has both required and given an excuse for states to really increase their surveillance, their control, and what we would really call tyranny and authoritarianism if it were not for the pandemic justification. So, monitoring where your cell phone's been to see who you're contacting to track COVID spread, drones flying around in China, watching people on the streets to see if they're wearing masks, people having ankle monitors put on them even though they haven't broken any laws to make sure they don't violate quarantine, people having police officers stationed outside their white picket fence preventing them from leaving their home. So there's been talk of a potential martial law situation. There's been talk of potential forced vaccinations. There's been talk of RFID chipping, vaccine passports. So what do you think? Is there going to be a ramp up of authoritarianism? Is this going to be used to usher in the New World Order? This is for, again, both Surprise and Dawson and anybody else after that who wants to weigh in. But are we going to see a return to normality, or is coronavirus going to be the beginning of a new normal?
I would say I don't think there's much evidence that it's going to bring about a new world order. I do see your first point that I think China is going to be using this to increase their overall state power, and they're going to use the argument of look how well we turned out versus Italy, the U.S., and other European countries. This is why authoritarianism works. And I do think you're going to see China try to flex its muscles and try to increase its authoritarian state. I would say for the U.S., I think things mainly go back to normal. But I mean, on the other hand, I do see some pluses coming out of it, and not in an intelligence sense, but I do see distance learning becoming more universal. I do see rural broadband getting more support. So I mean, I think there are as many opportunities coming out of this as there are threats to watch out for.
No, I would agree with that. I don't think it stays like this. First off, it can't. I mean, viruses don't rage all year. They call it a flu season for a reason. That's why you have people like the CDC worried that it's going to come back in November. Well, if it comes back, where'd it go? I mean, it's epidemiology 101 in that respect. So you can't keep people. You're not going to be locked down in July unless you're like, because that's just not how viruses work. But also, no, like it's not going to be. You're seeing capabilities that were already there. I live north of a county that was put under like curfew 9 to 5, but people don't want to do that because it's bad for business. I mean, that's why you have Lloyd Blankfein saying this was like a month ago, but yeah, some people are going to die, but like we got to people got to pay their rents. Like, the economy has no demand. We can't keep doing this shit. So it's like it's not good for business. I agree with Rap. I think there are going to be some good things that come out of it. A lot of things that we needed that we didn't have that we realized that maybe we should keep up, or a lot of things that we didn't need that we lost that we realized, oh, maybe that's not so important. But no, it's not going to be ankle monitors or RFID or anything like that. I've seen a lot of the stuff with Bill Gates, and that's creepy, but I don't see it happening. Just because it's too painful. What we're doing now is not ideal for people in charge. This is a nightmare. No one's licking their lips and rubbing or New York with this situation. This is a fucking nightmare. It's unemployment. If you just go by unemployment levels, it's like 1932 and then some, potentially. So no, it's going to go back to normal. And if for no other reason than the people in charge need it to get back to, because this whole thing is really messing up their system, which is our system. But they're on top of it.
Now, you know how there's a big uprising to have new gun owners nowadays through the NRA and everything. Do you see this being a liberalistic nightmare for the abolition of the Second Amendment?
Well, the Second Amendment's never get lost in the country. I don't think that's ever going to happen. The day I realized that was when it was like a week after Sandy Hook and nothing changed. It's for better or worse. I think gun rights in the United States, despite the fact, and probably no small part because of the fact that we're so paranoid about it. I own 3 guns myself. I get it. I don't think COVID or anything else is going to get that taken away, minus like an asteroid hit or like a legit zombie apocalypse. But even then, but those are situations where the government has lost control, so them calling for your guns is kind of useless at that point. So no, I have no fear for the United States. Again, for better or worse. That's just how I think it's too ingrained in this country.
Okay, thank you.
So maybe one more question at least I wanted to ask. I think Weber's or might wrap up in the next little while. But anyways, what this COVID situation, right? People are discussing if it's a bioweapon or not. But even say it isn't, that raises the possibility that in the future, different actors, state or non-state, will develop and release engineered bioweapons, and these could potentially be done by advanced weapons labs. But in the future, worrying possibility was that even something like a terrorist group or a radical political group or environmental group or even an individual could perhaps have the technology to create a virus. So do you think this is going to create a more or less unmanageable problem for intelligence and law enforcement? You know, what do you do if, you know, a moderately motivated and financed individual or group can produce something like COVID and release it? Is that even possible to contain at that point? If you see what I'm saying, like it's so much beyond just a terrorist making a bomb in their garage. If that terrorist can make a virus that can spread, is that something society can respond to?
It's just, in my opinion, and I want to hear Rap's thoughts on this, it's very hard to do. I mean, you kind of need an infrastructure that only a state can provide. And then releasing a bioweapon, it's kind of like a nuke. I mean, you're fucked, because it's not only is it hard to do, you kind of need a state to do it. And if you're not a state, then you kind of need a state to just give it to you. And you kind of need the leaders of those states to be, you know, and one of my favorite parlance is the dang Joker. I mean, they just want to see the world burn for reasons. And even the Al Qaeda people aren't like that. Like there's. So I mean, it's nothing. If it happened, it would fuck the world over. I mean, it's a nightmare scenario, but it's something that's, you know, you would need like some guy he's mad at the world and fuck it. You know, he's Bane from The Dark Knight Rises, and he just Gotham's got to go. We're fulfilling Ra's al Ghul's destiny. So I'm going to release this biological pathogen in the United States, and, you know, it's not just going to stay here. You've pretty much fucked world civilization, and then it's like the fruits of victory shall be ashes in your mouth. I mean, you're in a post-apocalyptic world, and you just have to think, A, doing it's hard, B, keeping it secret's hard, C, okay, having someone else to do it for you and them keeping a secret, and, you know, say, yeah, I'll risk getting my capital wiped off the map in a thermonuclear counterstrike or a return biological reprisal just so you can have your little project. All of these stars have to align, and then C or D, like being able to say, like, yes, I'm willing to end the world. I'm going to do all this to end civilization because, you know, the U.S. posted 500,000 troops in Saudi Arabia back in 1991. Like that's a lot that has to happen before that happens. So I see it more as a nuclear weapon. It's nothing that just anybody can do, no matter how much they want to, no matter how much money they have. And, you know, it's also hard to pull off. It's hard to get that under the nose of anybody right on, let alone the CIA's. But I want to hear Rap's thoughts on it.
There's anecdotal evidence to this as well, surprise, with that woman who tried to make a dirty bomb, spreading Ebola along the New York, like, tunnel systems and stuff like that, and it went absolutely nowhere. That's all I'll add.
Exactly. That's typically how that's going to.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it, because you run into the same issues with creating a dirty bomb, in that if you create a biological bomb, you're also most likely poisoning the people who are going to build it and deploy it. And it's like if you are fatally poisoning your main scientists for a unrealized attack, that's going to be stupidity.
Yeah, that would
And
be a
so-
suicide mission.
So true.
Yeah, and that's
So
why.
true. And she ended up getting arrested as well.
Yeah, hold on, and
in
that's
prison.
why you're seeing the more effective attacks being your stereotypical easy attacks where you hijack a truck and mow it through a crowd of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
just
ISIS
a
was-
few scenarios. If you read Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake, kind of envisions a scenario like this. And the problem I have with these kind of comforting thoughts is that, we speculate about people's sense of something like mutually assured destruction. And we say, well, people wouldn't release a virus because it would go worldwide and it would be indiscriminate. And unfortunately, there are motivations that people have that would not be disincentivized by this. So it could be anything
but that's
from
step 4.
Sorry?
That's step 4. That's before procurement, building, keeping it secret, deployment. Is the fact that
And
that's not the main thing. That's just like that's the last.
I
thing.
understand. Yeah. And I understand that these different factors would prevent 99% of people from ever thinking about something like this, and 99% of those who did from carrying it out. But it's a bit of a black swan scenario where it only takes, potentially 1 or 2 such events to be civilization changing, right? It's the same with a nuclear weapon. If someone can make their own nuclear weapon, well, 99% of people are not going to attempt that. 99% of people aren't going to pull it off. But if even one does, you have that black swan event. New York suddenly goes up in a nuke. Potentially, there's a misinterpretation of this. There's some retaliation against the wrong enemy. All of a sudden, you got, a global event. And I think with, the problem also is with the advancement of technology, it's just the cost of creating your own virus will continue to go down. The technology to do it will continue to improve and become more widespread. And so you have this problem of, given the advances in technology, the technological challenges associated with something like making a virus or a nuclear weapon in your own terrorist organization will continue to decrease to the point they'll become more and more available. And, 3D printing raises a lot of questions. If you have some, crazy genius with something like the Anarchist Cookbook and a 3D printer, what are the limits of what such a person could actually do? And so what I'm wondering basically is, how does society respond to this? Like, I agree with you, this is unlikely. There's a lot of reasons it hasn't happened yet, and hopefully it will never happen. But it seems inevitable to me that the states, as the power the civilians have continues to increase, they're going to have to either become more and more totalitarian, have more and more surveillance, more and more intelligence, more and more restrictions on people, or they're going to run the risk that, sooner or later, someone's going to manufacture a nuke in their garage or a virus. And so I just don't see how we resolve this paradox without sort of...
Well, and I'll kick the main thrust to your question to wrap, but I would just say on the technology point, it being more widespread does not make it more accessible. Typically, that leads to an increase in sophistication. So it's like you look at the Fat Man and Little Boy dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and you told someone, in 10 years, 5 countries are going to have like 20,000. Holy shit. In the 1960s, someone in fucking Miami is going to... But that's not how it works. Like, the more the technology develops, the more sophisticated it becomes. Not that any of us could build Fat Man or Little Boy, but we definitely couldn't build a multiple reentry vehicle for a Minuteman III missile. So I think when it comes to weaponry like that, that's so focused in state hands, the advancement of technology, it goes up, but it doesn't always go out. Certainly not for weapons. It doesn't mean that you or I, or really anybody that doesn't have like secret clearances, and it pretty much is no one who's off the radar, where someone's not going to be like within 2 days, hey, what are you doing? Can just access these. It's you're not going to make the Black Plague in your garage, because where are you going to get it? And then when you get it, how are you going to explain it? Et cetera, et cetera. But, Rap, how do you think a society would cope with that if it did?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too worried about it. in the past, people were freaking out about man-pad missiles, and that's commonly referred to as one of the dogs that didn't bark. Is that like, holy shit, we're going to see a explosion of terrorist groups with portable missiles, and we're going to see passenger travel become incredibly dangerous, and that didn't really have that much of an effect. And probably the worst when it comes to technology failing is in strategic bombing, and that during after World War One, there was a theory that if one bomber gets through and bombs a city, the entire city is going to revolt and the country will fall once the first bombs start. And that was famously unsuccessful in the Blitz during World War II. So I mean, I'm not too worried about it.
No, that's a great point. Like, we stumbled on a good point, and it was also I'm going to say it was unsuccessful in Germany because it didn't break the will. I mean, the Russians still had to storm the Reichstag before that all ended. But yeah, the bomber will always get through once you start just leveling cities and turning them into hellscapes, which is something no one ever could foresee before. There were some bombings in World War, not like World War II. It fulfilled everyone's worst nightmares and then some. And that was before nuclear weapons were developed. But it still didn't break the will of the populace. Just, if anything, it stiffened it. So I think the same. I think it's a great point in the sense that in a biological attack or a nuclear attack, I don't think everything just shuts down.
Yeah, there's a great book on this topic called Bombing to Win by, I can't remember his first name, but the last name is Pate.
I've heard of the title. I'm not sure. I haven't read it though.
Yeah, and the general rule is that coercive bombing to get a country to surrender almost never works. In fact, the only possible scenario where it has succeeded is in the Yugoslavia or the Kosovo conflict in the 90s, and even that was combined with a ground invasion. And so the only way to truly get a country to submit is if you have an army that's ready to do a ground invasion. So Syria would be considered a success because, yes, there's Russian air power, but it was combined with the Syrian army on the ground offensive.
Exactly, and it'd be horrific, obviously. Like, I don't want to give the impression that these are comforting tales. But even if we assume the likelihood, which I think Raph and I have both explained why we don't think it's going to happen, it's not going to be as decisive unless it's world ending. But then at that point, who cares? And then there's the ashes in your mouth. Victories taste like it. The fruits of victory, ashes in your type scenario. And you're right, there are people out there that might not give a fuck, but
you really Shogun, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Do you mind if I give a shout out to a VC that was on another server here recently?
Oh yes.
If you wish, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, there was a great VC on one of the politics servers on Friday by, I can't remember his name, but he is an Australian historian of the World War II and specifically the Eastern Front. And one of the things he mentioned is that in Germany, and I'll also include this worldwide, is that there's a fascination with knockout blows in warfare, and that like if we only do this, the enemy will surrender in no time. And that has been, and that idea persisted in World War I, where people thought the war would be over by Christmas. That was in World War II, and the Germans thought that they would have Moscow surrendering in no time. And that was true with the Iraq War, that once Baghdad was liberated, we'll be welcomed by the people, handing our soldiers flowers. And so in almost every example, it's turned out not to be the case.
there are some aberrations outside of that that were true. For example, after the United States dropped nuclear weapons on Japan, they surrendered really fast.
Yeah, it took two of them, though, and it took the Emperor intervening. The Imperial Japanese High Command still wanted to fight on. Operation Downfall was a go till like literally the last second. That's not counting the 3 million Japanese troops in China.
Soviet. Yeah, that also is combined with the Soviet invasion of Manchuria.
See, I mean, the Japanese were not, and that's not really a knockout blow. That's more of like a cherry on top after a 4-year aquatic hellscape, fighting our way to the gates of Japan. And I mean, and also never forget that, you know, with the unrestricted submarine warfare against Japanese shipping, that may have ended the war a few years earlier had it not been for the failure of U.S. torpedoes. That also played a role. Do you think so? I mean, I know we're straying from the original topic, but do you think that that Japan could have been strangled in 1943? I haven't seen anything on.
I would say possibly, but I mean, Japan historically has been a very research poor country, and if you're not getting food to your residents, that's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting. We'll never know, but I think the unrestricted warfare, submarine warfare, could have been handled better, no doubt.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I got some questions.
I'm sure you do.
I got a lot of the questions. So the Pentagon spent $20 million researching UFOs. Do you have any exopolitics discussions whatsoever? Obviously not, but you know, I called the Office of Naval Intelligence while drunk the other day, and they're like, "Hey, thank you for calling the Watch." And I was talking to him about aliens, and he's like, "Yeah, we know they're there," because this was after the Nimitz shit. There's got to be that's got to be the number one focus, right? I mean, I know you can't really say if, of course it is, but you know, like
you probably got an 18-year-old who was bored off his mind, so he was giving you. You probably provided him a few good laughs.
I'm not using that as like a basis for the concept, though. But we have like many millions of dollars of approved spending on the research R&D for this. Have you read any of the To the Stars stuff? Have you checked out any of that with Luis Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, Hal Puthoff, ex-CIA DoD guys doing stuff for that? I mean, that's kind of big news stuff.
No, I haven't. You'd have to ask Surprise if he has.
I have not even heard of these authors, let alone their work.
All right, well, he's a Tom DeLonge project that he's working on. The Department of basically, he wrote a book called Secret Machines, and the Department of Defense was like, "How the fuck does he know this shit?" And went and like practically abducted him, made him a Mason, and now he's doing this public-facing company. And Tom DeLonge was worth $60 million prior to this, so he doesn't really need the money. So we're just kind of wondering, you know, like, I don't know, what's going on.
Yeah, I haven't heard about it. That sounds like bullshit.
No, it's not bullshit. I muted Shogun. So, well, it's not bullshit because, like, it's official. It's got many ranking officials that are part of it. If you check out.
So the Department of Defense abducted a guy, made him a Mason, and he's good now?
Well, no, like, he wrote a book. he wrote a book called Secret Machines. He got attention of the DoD. Dude, Shogun is like mega. So he got attention of the DoD, and then after that, they in communications with him. He's the guy that's the head band guy for Blink-182 and all that stuff. So they're using him as the front-facing guy. He's also a Mason, so that's part of it. But he's this filter now for the intelligence community to filter extraterrestrial information through. And they're releasing things like advanced technologies, working with the Army, and all kinds of other stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, it sounds like
it sounds dubious. I don't know.
Well, DeLong, he's blind, man. They should have let me get in the CIA as an advisor because most likely all the CIA people, they could do remote viewing and stuff, but they can't see invisible dimensions like I can.
Have you tried applying?
Well, I saw a super soldier in the desert.
So, like Luis Elizondo. I don't know what's going on with Shogun. Please don't unmute him until he figures it out. So Luis Elizondo is a former employee of the Office Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, OUSDI, and a former U.S. Army counterintelligence special agent. So him and about 7 other people with that high level of a clearance type thing are working on this project. So it's significant and real. So I would check it out if you haven't, because it is of importance globally, I would suppose, as being part of the filter of the quote UFO stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I just
Can you guys hear me?
Now we go.
Matt,
What's
we
going on?
can. You
I've
were
been trying
roboting
to
like
for a
hell
long
before.
time, and everybody just kept
I have no
over-talking
idea.
me, and then NSA kept muting me, but nobody told me what the problem was.
we couldn't hear you, and your mic was echoing. So, like every time your mic would go green, it would just echo NSA's voice like a motherfucker.
Well, yeah, that's because NSA has an echoing mic, and he kept over-talking me, and he creates overtalk when he does not.
None of us could hear you though. Like we thought you were just sitting there with an echoing mic. Like you're
That's
making
weird.
no sound.
Maybe my headphones fucked up. Anyways, I apologize.
Yeah,
No worries. No
your
worries.
mic to your earpiece.
Yeah, it was
In
echoing.
any case, I do think this has been a pretty good episode on intelligence. We can do another one on military stuff with surprise history. We'll do another one on aliens and UFOs with the NSA. And we'll set one up right away with Richard Dawson on whatever political subject you might want to cover. But I think this might be a good time to wrap this episode up. So does anyone have any final closing statements here?
Go ahead, Richard Dawson.
No, I mean, I'm just saying I was thinking about something on military budgeting, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, we'll figure out an episode. And yeah, I'd like to do a series with Surprise about military and historical stuff. So thank you very much, Surprise, and Richard Dawson for stepping in as guests. Did you want to say something else, Surprise?
No, this has been great.
No, okay. Great, yeah, so thanks very much, everybody. So just a reminder, we're the Roundtable Discord server. Just Google Roundtable Discord. Find us through Politics or Conspiracy on Discord. Follow us on all different social media that you might be on, Facebook, Twitter, etc. RoundtableDiscord.com is our website. We do podcast special events every day. You can find them on YouTube, Podcast Addict, and Podbean. So join us tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central, 2000 is the usual time. Thanks very much, everybody, for joining the live audience. Let's please jump now to Roundtable 1 or another Roundtable free discussion. We're going to vacate out of here now. So thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.